This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch, get up to 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, give us something to talk about in the post-credit scene at the end of each episode, or join us for our monthly movie club Zoom call where we discuss a film together, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
Yag Shamash, and welcome to the Cult Popture podcast. My name is AJ, and I'm joined as usual by Richard. How you going, Richard?
Hello, I'm going all right.
And you are tuning in to an interview episode. We haven't done an interview in years, Richard. It's been ages.
It has been. We loved our interviews. It's been too long.
Arguably the best content we produce, and we barely ever do it.
Inarguably the best content we produce.
And this is a very special interview. This is an interview with Lou Gluchov, who is a production assistant among many other filmmaking things, who worked on, among many other films, Borat's subsequent movie film. And the way that Lou got in contact with us is that a couple months ago, we released a video, I should say, on the Cult Popture YouTube channel, which was all about Borat 2 and how it treated comedy in a post-enlightened 2020 environment.
In a woke world where you can't say anything these days.
And Lou actually commented on that video and introduced himself as someone who'd worked on the film. So we got in contact and to do a little interview with him. You can find a link to that video in the show notes. You don't really have to watch it if you don't want to.
Well, if you want to call yourself a fan of Cult Popture, you need to watch it.
Yeah, but it's also not exactly. We're not exactly asking him about the same.
What did you think of my video?
Yeah, exactly. What you should do before you listen to this episode is watch Borat's subsequent movie film, because it does get a little. At times, there are moments where you won't know what we're talking about if you're not familiar with the film, I guess. And sure. You should watch it, because even just watching it will clue you into the fact that this was an incredible production, an incredibly different production to what film productions usually are. And Lou was present for a lot of the scarier and more interesting scenes from Borat 2. We talk about it in the interview, but Lou was present for the debutante ball scene. He was present for CPAC, the right-wing rally, which famously nearly got Sacha Baron Cohen lynched, and he also has a lot of information around the QAnon guys that Sacha stayed with for 5 days to record while in character to get all the stuff they needed to tell their crazy and very interesting story. So he's got a bunch of stories about Sacha Baron Cohen, about Maria Bakalova, who plays Tuta in the film, we just wanted to come in at the start and say, if you're a fan of Cult Popture, this should be a fun time. If you've discovered us through hearing about this interview, stay tuned. We've got heaps of stuff on here, but let's get to the interview now before we lose your precious attention. And let's talk to Lou about Borat 2. Very nice.
My wife.
We are here with Lou Gluchov. Hello, Lou.
Hello.
How is it going?
I'm having a blast. I'm really excited to be here.
You told us before we started recording that you're using a McDonald's Wi-Fi from your 100%. How did you phrase it? From the van you live in?
My nomad life.
Yes, very cool.
No, I work in the film and television industry, and I was on the road so much that I made the jump to go nomadic.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I moved out of my apartment in the middle of the pandemic, and I have been completely mobile since April 2020.
Wow.
And then not long after this movie comes out that like destigmatizes it and wins Best Picture, so it's convenient timing.
The humor on that one was it comes out, I see it, and it's super moving for me, and then I work a movie in in March, and one of the producers for it was part of the creative team on Nomadland. I got a trip out of him being part of that. He got a trip out of the fact that I was a nomad and working on things. And I love what I do. And when life kind of comes into the art, it's just marvelous.
That's awesome. Cool. So we're mainly here to talk to you, Lou, because you were a production assistant on BORAT subsequent movie film, and we made a video about that film and wanted to get some insight, especially considering how unique of a film BORAT 2 was, not just in terms of what the film was, but in terms of how I assume it was made. So thank you for coming on the show. We're very excited to ask you some of these questions.
You're very welcome. I watched the video and I had to comment, which was not something I normally do, because you guys really hit home on what it felt like with the project. And
that's awesome.
I felt compelled to actually say something. And then because I was involved in the project, I mentioned that I was, and here we are.
So, Lou, do you want to just briefly go over like what your role on BORAT 2 was?
Absolutely. I was hired as a production assistant, which in film terms means someone that does a little bit of everything at the bottom. There is no such thing as a role in a film, crew that has no purpose. Every role has a purpose. Some people are better at them than others, but production assistants allow production to happen. We are driving people around, running errands, making sure people don't go into places they're not supposed to. We are there to help set things up, help break things down, move things. At the end of the day, if you don't have a good team of PAs, you don't have a functioning movie.
There you go.
When we were at broadcasting school, I described working on news as like every single role in a production is the second most important role, because every single person has someone that is more important than them. Maybe even the top person who relies on you doing your job. And that's kind of like, the PAs, it's like you say, they're at the bottom, but it is like the entire production falls over.
Exactly.
In terms of specific responsibilities as a production assistant, like, can you give us maybe a couple of examples? Richard and I both are reasonably well versed in the world of filmmaking, but for our listeners who maybe aren't, what's maybe one or two examples of what a production assistant would do on your average film?
On an average film, because BORAT subsequent movie film is anything but average.
Sure, yeah.
But on an average set, they are running and getting people coffee, making sure your actors are where they are supposed to be, and knowing where your actors are at all times, running errands, doing something called a lockup, which is preventing people from crossing into the line of the camera.
Okay.
And then you could also have an audio lockup where you're keeping people quiet so their voices don't travel and get heard by the sound department.
Nice.
And on a lot of sets, you'll have a production assistant in a van or a car driving people around if you don't have an actual transportation department. And so it really comes into a catch-all. Setting up lunch, they're the people moving all your things around, be it tables, chairs, tents. It's a lot of manual labor. It's a lot of running around. Very little in the film industry is actually mechanized. So there's a lot of carrying of things.
Right.
And PAs carry a lot of things.
Nice. Well, your nomadic lifestyle probably puts you in prime position to do that sort of thing.
It does. It allowed me an opportunity that a large majority of the industry doesn't get, because most people in my industry are localized. They stay in their home area and they find work that's around there. I, on the other hand, as long as I can make sure I have a roof over my head and a place to go to the bathroom, I can go anywhere in the continental US. And I have. In 2019, I worked in 17 different states.
Wow. That's awesome. Where are you right now, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't mind you asking. I'm in Greater Atlanta, Georgia right now.
Oh, nice. Lots of film work there, I imagine.
Absolutely. It is the largest film location in the country next to LA and New York.
Cool.
I'm here. I'm actually on one of my days off. I'm working on a movie at the moment, not as a production assistant, in the Greater Atlanta area. And it's been a trip so far.
Awesome.
So how did you get involved with BORAT 2 then?
By being kind. The pandemic hadn't started yet, and I had just finished working and was sicker than a dog visiting friends of mine in Northern Virginia, and had passed up on another job. And a friend of mine who I had worked for previously as a production coordinator had just gone back from a month abroad in Europe, and I was talking with her every day, because she was traveling alone, and was just sharing her experiences from afar. And when she got back, she sent me an email from the Union Production Coordinator email list in LA. A project was looking to hire a production assistant local out of Savannah, down in Georgia.
Yeah.
And for 3 weeks. So 3-week job means I can put myself up. I'm good. 3 weeks can be really good. So I applied for it, had the phone interview, was hired in the interview, and then drove from Virginia to Atlanta. And then, because that's where everything was starting. And then we went to our first location, which was in the greater Macon, Georgia area. And as irony had it, I was hired as a Savannah local, and we never worked in Savannah. So we were in Georgia for 3 weeks, and then I got asked to drive up to Washington, D.C. to work a week up there. And then my section of the film ended. I came back to Atlanta to work another project. And then we were supposed to start up the 3rd week of March, and the pandemic shut everything down.
Right.
Wow. And like, as two people living in New Zealand, I do just have to ask, what do you mean by the pandemic? I'm kidding. But,
I am quite, and I've been following all of that, and have been quite envious of coming down to New Zealand to work down there one day is on my list of things to do.
A lot of film work here now, yeah.
Because I've loved a number of projects, the Almighty Johnsons. And,
oh, wow. not every American we talk to knows about the Almighty Johnsons.
Oh, it was marvelous.
That's awesome.
In addition to everything with the Lord of the Rings and whatnot, New Zealand is a gorgeous place to be, and a great place to film in. And I, as an American citizen, because I'm considered below the line, which means I'm not a head of the department or a producer, getting me to work in a foreign country is a lot more difficult than because you have all these very good local talents who are there who want to work just as badly as I do.
Yeah, exactly.
So in this process of getting hired, when did you actually find out that you were going to be working on another Borat? Because it was very hush-hush in terms of it wasn't really known that it was filmed.
Exceedingly hush-hush. I did not know I was working on Borat until I got on location in Atlanta and started meeting my people in person. And
wow.
Which is not out of the ordinary. A lot of projects you don't know what you're working on until you basically start what you're working on or get your initial paperwork.
Wow.
I would have to say, like, I don't know what your reaction was, Lou, but I would have had my mind blown by discovering that it was Borat 2 was this job that I'd been hired for. Is that what it was like?
No, not at all. I'm familiar with Sasha's work, but was not a huge fan of his work.
Right.
the type of humor was not the kind that appealed to me.
Yep.
You just see it and you're like, oh, this guy.
Well, no, as an actor, he's incredible. And with the material he comes up with and the creativity involved, I don't discount it at all. It just wasn't my taste. But seeing him in things that weren't his own, where he was just part of the talent, you could tell he's very good at what he does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And part of the reason I was hired on was I have a large amount of reality TV experience. And even though this was a union production, it ran like reality TV.
That makes a lot of sense, yeah.
And they were dealing with, they only had about a quarter of the staff they actually needed traveling with us because we, Sasha very specifically wanted to have as small a footprint as possible and not let people know that there was a movie being shot there.
Right.
Or what movie it was being shot at all. One of my fellow production assistants served as a photo double for Sasha and would go to places dressed up as BORAT to serve as a false flag to not let people think we were actually filming.
Wow. That's so interesting. That's exactly the kind of information I was interested in talking to you about. That's so cool. So with how many with any more like sort of surprises that like weren't typical of a film shoot that you encountered when working on this? We should actually ask, can you tell us which scene specifically, because you said you weren't present for the whole shoot. Can you tell us?
I wasn't present for the whole shoot. I worked on the debutante ball and the bathroom scene in Georgia.
Cool.
And I was involved with CPAC. And then the pandemic happened, the show shuts down. I move out of my apartment. I'm living with friends in Northern Virginia working as a nanny in May. And I get a call from the production supervisor that says, we're coming back. And if you happen to be in the Pacific Northwest, we would love to have you. And I said, of course I can be there. And I drove cross country. It took me 6 days. 6 days and like 2,300 miles, maybe more. Probably more. Probably more. It was a lot. It was a long drive, and then I worked. I worked the month of June and a little bit of July in Washington State and Oregon. We were the first union production to come back online since the pandemic started. And when the film unions came out with what was known as the white pages, which is the COVID protocols that allow work to happen, we were the very first project to come online. That was union.
Nice, cool. And what scenes were shot in that area?
In Washington, there was a lot of the story. The storyline. The biggest piece was the sequestering with the 2 QAnon guys.
Really? Wow. Okay.
And also the anti-mask rally.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
This is so interesting. These are quite juicy scenes.
Well, very much so. And after we were outed at the rally, we had to relocate from where we were staying in Tacoma all the way down to Eugene, Oregon, 4 hours to the south because it got too hot to stay in Washington State.
Wow. Sure. That's incredible.
But yeah, so that's a bit of a famous like behind the scenes thing now. But for those that might not know about that being found out, do you just want to kind of set that scene for us?
Absolutely. All of this is stories that I was told by members of the crew because I specifically said I did not want to go into the rally.
Yeah, sure. Wow. Yeah. Fair enough.
But my particular role, I was helping a lot more on the coordination side of things because I have a large amount of experience in that. One of the things before I get into the rally was each of us on the crew, we were handling a lot more hats than what a union crew is normally used to. A union crew, you stay in your lane, you do your description of your job. On reality work, and especially non-union work, you have people who will handle multiple roles. So for me, I got hired as a production assistant, but it came out very quickly that I had coordinating experience, so I was able to find gear and crew in various parts of the country. I was running around and making sure that we were able to find food for us to eat for lunch and get it all ordered, because we were sometimes we could order food, but they actually did a special stipend where we were all buying our own food and cooking it ourselves, because they didn't want to have the open spread of catering. But also, I work in the art department on occasion, and you will see my handiwork on screen. All the emojis that are hand drawn for the faxes are me.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
And then while we were up in Washington State, I drove Maria's RV.
Oh, cool.
Because I have years of non-union transportation experience, driving trucks on projects and whatnot. So driving her around was easy.
Nice. That's awesome.
But to set the scene for the mask rally, they've been planning this for weeks. And throughout that whole time, you have Sasha embedded into the house where the two gentlemen are there with him. There's an entire crew on the backside of the house because the guys thought they were working on a reality show and just interact. And Sasha never broke character while in the house.
Wow.
So they were the one. He and those gentlemen wrote the song.
Yeah. Because I watched. They recently released some supplementary material for Borat 2, and it shows them like create the song together, which I thought was very funny.
So that was like 5 days while they were in that house, and then all of them go to the rally. All my cameramen have hidden cameras in one form or another, and one of our camera guys specializes in hidden cameras.
You'd have to for this, yeah.
Well, absolutely. And they have an ambulance set up as the getaway vehicle.
Yeah.
And they have a path preset on how to get out. Everyone had escape plans set up. You had an entire contingent of the crew on there, and you had production assistants, you had actors, you had the camera people, costumes, everyone. There was at least a representative of every department there. All the sound stuff was placed on everybody, and they go up there. The song gets sung. The bits going on in there getting recorded with Maria and the two QAnon guys.
Yeah.
All that goes off without a hitch. And then one of my camera guys gets outed. Someone says that guy has a camera.
Oh my God.
And that's when things really started. And I was off location, but listening to everything. We had an online chat. We didn't have walkie-talkies. We weren't looking like we were on a film set.
Yeah. And
things start to go south. Everyone is following their exit plan, and everything goes fine until the exit path is blocked because of an unplanned Black Lives Matter counter protest to the alt-right anti-mask rally that we were at.
Wow. And Borat is in the direct center of all of this.
In the direct center of all of this. And blessing to the powers, everyone was able to make it off location to our rendezvous point, deeper into Olympia, but still in the city, but away from everything. And no one got caught, no one got hurt, and it was a real blessing.
Yeah. Yeah, because there's quite scary footage of Sasha like escaping, like people recognizing or realizing the jig is up, and him running away into the getaway vehicle.
Absolutely, and he broke character because the safety of his people was in danger, and awesome. Sasha put the value of his crew above himself.
Wow. What a great review of like it's so good to know that what this looks like a pretty dangerous mission, a pretty dangerous film shoot, and it's so cool to know that Sacha Baron Cohen has got like his priorities straight when it comes to that sort of thing.
And that wasn't the only situation where we were all in some form of danger.
Yeah, I'll bet.
The scenes I was involved in, I was involved in, as I said, was the debutante ball, the bathroom interaction, CPAC, and the mask and the anti-mask rally, and I was told stories of what happened in New York when. With Giuliani.
Yeah, I'll bet, yeah.
None of my crew got arrested. They had to send in a third-party company to pick up all the gear that was left behind.
Wow. This is punk rock, man. Like this is this is so awesome.
My mentor, who is the DIT, the digital image technician, she actually dodged police officers going down one of the elevators as they were starting to lock down the building as she got the footage out.
Wow. I'm curious, like, with the debutante ball, because that's something where obviously you've got a whole crew in there kind of thing. What did you tell them that you were filming?
The debutante ball was special. I was actually on location. I was in the ball for that one. It was a 4-month long con for that entire organization, and to say that they were doing a documentary about the debutante scene in Macon, Georgia. So they got the organization to set up a ball specifically for us to film.
Wow.
And I have a couple of stories with that one if you had different questions.
No. Go on. Tell us some stories from the debutante ball.
Well, 2 moments. One was definitely a production moment, and then one was an interacting with the people there.
Yeah.
The production moment is we had all of our stuff set to be mobile, so we had a video village, a monitor with a receiver for people to be able to watch what's being recorded on camera. And we had that set up in an SUV, and it was my key set PA, one of the other PAs, myself, and one of the producers. And we're outside at the time, and the producer wants to see what's going on. Well, everything in the village setup is off, and my other 2 PAs are deers in the headlight. They don't know what to do, and I take a look and I flip all the switches that need to be flipped, turn it on, and it pops on. The producer closes the doors and watches, and they come up to me and they say, "Lou, how did you know that?" And I said, "This is my last PA job. I'm joining the union to be in camera department." and as such, I'm currently in the application process to join IATSE 600, the camera union here in the States. Nice. As a digital loader. I handle media now. Cool. So this really was my last production assistant job.
Wow.
And the inside, they had vetted everyone who attended, and those who passed the vet were allowed to go into this closed room to interact with Sasha and Maria while they were in character. But there was a number of people who had failed the vet who still attended because you couldn't tell them not to show up. It would alert them that something else is going on. And my second assistant director and I are in front of a pair of sliding doors that don't slide easy, so the 2 of us are moving them when people are wanting to come in and out. And I am not a very big person. I stand 5'7", and I'm very small in stature. And I did not know that I needed to be dressed up until I was told I was going to be on location. So I was in a black polo shirt, khakis, and was wearing a pair of the Apple ear headphones that had the cable that ran to my walkie-talkie so I could hear what was going on. And I had my walkie under my shirt. Mm-hmm. So from the outside looking in, it looks like I'm a rather small security officer.
Yeah.
And that the walkie was a concealed carried pistol. And so I'm on one side. My boss, the second AD, is on the other, who definitely looks older than I do, though I had him by a decade. The joys of good genes and good looks. And one of the fathers, who stands around 6'7", so towering over me, drunker than a skunk, is just trying to intimidate me in some fashion, coming into my personal space, and I'm just doing the stoic, I'm a security guy, just doing my thing. I have improv acting experience, so it wasn't that far out of the ordinary. And he says, "I bet you're even packing over there, because it's an obvious bulge." And I do non-committal with my words, but kind of like give him a tilt of the head of like, you know what's happening here, right? And then he reaches down and pats me right on the walkie-talkie.
Jesus.
And I immediately change my demeanor, where I push my shoulders forward, I tilt my head to the side, and I have all humor vanishes from my face, and I give him a look of, what did you just do?
Wow.
Jesus.
And the guy puts his hands up, takes 3 or 4 steps back, and just then walks away.
Jesus. That's awesome.
That's so scary. That's awesome. What a great story about like what it's like. Like you could almost do a whole movie about what it's like to be a crew member on a BORAT film.
Very much so.
Sounds of it, because it's so. In that instance, you were sort of playing the part of a security guard. I'm interested to know, especially with the kind of image that the BORAT universe sets up of Kazakhstan as kind of like a backwards, very low tech kind of place. Was there ever a moment where you or someone on your team, like, are you playing a character when you're on set? Like in that instance, you're a security guard, but does anyone ever have to play like someone from Kazakhstan or someone who looks like they know Borat or would be like Borat?
No, none of the crew were ever filmed on purpose.
Right.
We weren't part of the furniture, as it were. For the debutante ball, we actually had 4 background actors there. Mm-hmm, who were an alternate film crew in the MC.
Right. Okay.
And they were on film, but none of the crew themselves were ever recorded.
Nice. Good to know.
And when the jig was up in the debutante ball, which was after the dance scene, part of my job for that day was the background PA. So I was in charge of those four background actors. So I had my SUV ready, and they snuck out, and we were the first people off location.
Nice.
And to make sure that they were safe and taken care of. The full-time security detail, with the exception of the head of the team, were all former Mossad, which was humorous in the fact that when it came out that I'm Jewish, the first question they would ask me is, do I speak Hebrew? I do not, but I know enough to follow conversation.
Yeah.
The joys of teaching Jewish religious school for many years.
Nice.
I'm curious, you mentioned there about the debutante ball that you had like a vetting process. Was that just put people in a room and go, what do you think of Borat? And if they go, I haven't seen it, they go, cool, you can come.
I was not involved in the vetting process. That was handled by our field producers.
Right.
And I have no idea what they did in order to be able to say if someone was vetted or not.
Wow. Yeah, that's such a fascinating thing, yeah.
Yeah, I watched a behind-the-scenes video where Sacha Baron Cohen talked about how they worked out that if they put him in a ginger wig, that people were less likely to recognize him as Borat, and so that's why so many of the characters that Borat plays is like a redhead, because that
because the character is dark, and that's what people are expecting.
Yeah. So is there did you witness any instances of someone recognizing Borat or recognizing Sacha Baron Cohen outside of the mask rally, of course, which is the sort of famous story? Is there any other times where something had to be adjusted because someone worked it out or realized?
I have. One of the QAnon guys was a second choice.
Wow.
And we had to go back and refilm the scene where he was getting picked up to go to the QAnon house.
Mm-hmm.
The original choice figured out he was Borat.
Wow.
And then he was paid and asked to go home.
That's so interesting. So the house that they filmed in wasn't their house. That was set up by the...
It was an Airbnb.
Right. That's so cool. It's so cool to work out how because that, I think, is one of the most, there's so many mind-blowing moments in the movie, but one of it for me was just you're telling me Sacha Baron Cohen pretended to be Borat while cameras weren't rolling for 5 days in this one house? That's crazy. That's so interesting.
They had to install fiber into the house to be able to handle the amount of cameras and data that was flowing through there.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Because that all those camera angles are hidden cameras throughout the house.
Mm-hmm.
So they were all linked to a master system that was recording it all.
Yeah.
So we were basically live streaming for 5 days.
Fuck. That's so much fucking data. That's so much. Oh my God. Because that's at the same time, I'm not surprised in the sense as the amount of footage that was captured. It would have to be something like that, I guess, Wow. That's so interesting.
Yeah. Nothing was done ad hoc. Everything was planned meticulously. I do actually have a story with me interacting with Sacha for the first time.
Tell us, please.
Well, it had already come out that I can draw, and I was asked to draw out the room layout for the mansion we filmed in it for the debutante ball, because they needed to figure out what movement they were going to do, what rooms they were going to be in, and the exit plan. And so, but they wanted it on a larger than a computer screen. So they got one of the giant dry erase boards, and I'm a hardcore long-term tabletop gamer, and using years of map skills, I hand drew the map from my tablet onto the dry erase board. And it was to scale, and they were. You had all the producers, Sacha and Maria, the writers, and all the crew that was going to be involved in there, sound, camera, costumes, everybody, art department, they were all there, and the entire room stops because they're all looking at me not noticing a thing, hand drawing the map. And then I finish, and I have this circle around me, including Sacha, and I look directly at him and says, "Is there anything else you need, sir?" And he had this moment of being taken aback because everyone either called him the nickname, the character nickname for while he was on set, or Sacha. They were just very casual with him. And here I am in complete seriousness and respect, and it completely caught him off guard.
That's so funny.
And he said, "No, that's everything we need at the moment." I said, "Thank you very much, sir," and went and got out and left the room because I wasn't needed in there. And I then, when we were in Eugene in Oregon, months later, he's getting a costume fitting for New York and figuring out how they wanted to do things. And I'm sitting in the room as a representative of production. And he comes in, he's doing his thing, and he pipes up and says, "Is there someone from production here?" And I immediately stand up and said, "That's me, sir." And he said, "Lou, good to see you. How have you been?"
That's awesome.
And he knew everyone on the crew. I knew stuff about them and was genuinely happy to see all of us. And once the pleasantries were done, he told me what he wanted. I conveyed it to production, and then he went back to doing what he was doing to setting up for New York. And he asked to clear some of the room because there was too many people in there for his taste. And I was one of the people to go out, and I just stayed outside because I needed to be around if they needed me.
Nice.
So Sasha is incredibly nice, incredibly kind, and so thoughtful.
Nice.
If I ever had the opportunity to work for him again, I would do so in a heartbeat.
Nice.
It's adorable. But I guess as well, because of how unique of a production it was, there would have been, the pandemic happens, sees you all this time later, the genuine joy and relief that you would feel, being you're back and you're all right,
Well, the project itself had some really amazing aspects to it. As soon as the pandemic hit, they rewrote the back half of the script.
Yeah, I imagine, yeah.
So they rewrote half the script, and when they got finished filming, they completed the post-production in 2 months.
Wow. Yeah, I heard that it was one of the fastest post-production turnarounds in
ever.
Yeah.
Do you know much about the original script?
I do know a lot about the original script. I never read it because as a production assistant, I did not need to know what was happening that day. It wasn't in my purview.
Yeah.
I still have my copies of the original scripts that I had, but they're not something I would send out in public consumption.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. I'm interested to know, and we sent you these questions ahead of time, so for anyone listening who thinks I'm going, being a bit brash by asking this, was there an expectation from the crew to be politically aligned with the message of the film? I can't imagine there were any PAs or anyone who was a Trump supporter or even a Republican. It feels like it's such a politically charged film, and I'm interested to know if there's an expectation to be on board behind the scenes.
There wasn't. We had members of the crew who were centralists like myself, or liberal, or further liberal. We did have some conservative people involved, but at the end of the day, none of us talked about politics. We were there to create a product and create a piece of art. The most politically charged scene of it all was CPAC, where Sasha and two of our stunt team went in Trump costumes.
Yeah.
And then one of our producers went in KKK robes.
So that wasn't Borat going in there.
No, Sasha was only the first one.
Right. There you go.
And Sasha was the first one, and then we had two members of our stunt team that were there for the second and third ones because there was more scenes that had to get filmed. All three of them were taken back by security and released, and the producer in the KKK robes was never stopped.
Fit right in.
Which still blows my mind that they never gave him pause or anything.
Yeah, man. Far out. That's insane.
That part is still very wild to me.
Did you see, was there any, do Sasha or Maria, do they, break character between takes? Are you ever looking at Borat and he's speaking in a reasonably posh British accent or anything like that?
When we were filming and we weren't in situ, where, we were actually stuck someplace, and we had people around, they broke character all the time between takes. because Sasha was giving instruction, and he gave instruction as Sasha, not as Borat.
Wow. And that's legitimately interesting to know, because it could really go either way. I would not have been surprised if between takes you've got Borat being like, okay, so now this next scene, we're going to do this. And, it could really go
at the end of the day, Sasha was Sasha when he needed to be Sasha, and he was Borat when he needed to be Borat.
Nice. Interesting.
And working with Maria was amazing. She is such a good actress.
Yeah, no, I had her picked for Best Actress at the Oscars. I thought she did an incredible job. She's the heart and soul of the film, in a film that didn't need a heart and soul. It's crazy.
Her quality of performance was just so spot on and so honest, and so moving. I remember we were filming her being released from the cage. And how the performance you were getting from both of them, and even with us being there way late, she never complained, and she kept up with Sasha. And when she had to stay in character the whole time, she stayed in character the whole time.
That's awesome. She does have the same accent, I think, as her character, which I think is probably the most would be the most distinguishing thing between seeing someone in character and not in character. But that's really cool. That's good to know. It's cool to hear how professional and kind and stuff everyone was.
We were really lucky. For me personally, working on Borat reshaped my career.
That's awesome. Wow.
I had been slowly getting into the camera department, specifically media managing and digital loading, which for those who don't know, because we're working with digital cameras, you need someone who basically stewards the media through its life cycle on set. And that's what the digital loader does. They're in charge of the media, making sure that it goes into the camera and it's formatted and ready to go. And then when it's done being filmed on, it comes out. We scrub it to make sure that the footage is clean, that there's no corruptions on the file, and then offload it onto multiple hard drives so that the digital image technician can get it ready for the editors.
Nice.
That was the direction I was heading in. I also do some camera assisting where I'm actually working on the camera itself. I'm not operating it, but making sure that it's ready to be operated.
Yeah.
And I was doing a little bit here and a little bit there. And so I wanted to talk to our DIT and say, well, what do you recommend? And I was expecting about a hour talk, and it turned into a 4-hour conversation where we closed out the hotel bar and a invitation to interview with their company.
That's awesome.
I interviewed, they brought me on. I'm an apprentice with them. And for the last 3 features that I've worked on, I've been working with them and their system. And I wouldn't have been in the position to do this sort of thing had not I been on Borat.
Borat 2, changing lives. Changing lives.
Very much so.
Just to sort of focus on wrapping up, thank you for taking the time out of your day to talk to us, Lou.
Absolutely.
Just thought we'd quickly ask, are there any other stories you want to tell us? Do you have a best day or worst day on set that you want to tell us about?
I told you the stories from the debutante ball, which are very noteworthy for me.
Yeah.
The Trump costume that Sasha was to be wearing was being shipped in from the UK.
Yeah.
And it did not arrive in Georgia before we left for Washington, D.C. So I had to wait the whole weekend for it to arrive. And I had an SUV at the time.
Yeah.
So I was going to drive it up and then drive stuff back to Georgia.
Yeah.
And we had a barber's chair that we were using for him to get stuff set up. So I had to break that down. And then I had multiple departments saying, here, we couldn't fit this. Could you take this up? And I said, yeah, I could take this up. That shouldn't be a problem. Well, the box ended up being much larger than I was expecting. So I had to completely re-Tetris my car And every inch of space in my car that was not occupied by me was occupied by stuff. And I took photographs of how Tetris deep I had my vehicle. And I had members of the crew just had their jaws drop of, how did you do that?
Yeah.
And then first time on set in Washington, where I was driving the RV, and our first assistant director was saying, "Okay, everyone, give Lou a little bit of space. This is his first time doing driving." And my window was down, and I laughed to the point that that it almost stopped everyone for a second, and people looked and said, "I've been driving non-union transpo for 3 years. This is just my first time driving an RV. The only thing different was knowing where the generator turned on." We were able to, we picked up a production assistant in Seattle because we needed an extra set of hands. And it was his first time being a PA. And this was what he wanted to do. And due to the fact my car was broken into in Oregon, I couldn't leave to go to New York with them. So we sent him.
Nice.
And and he did great. And it led him to fly back to when they flew him back. He went up to Seattle, got his things, and moved to LA and finished the entire movie.
Wow.
That's and awesome. Now he's living in LA working as a PA down there.
Wow. There you go. The places the industry takes you.
Yeah. Because I was unable to go, it gave him the opportunity to really show how good he was. And the project kept him on until the end.
Awesome.
What do you think of Borat 2?
I was really impressed. Yeah. Honestly, I was really impressed by it. I was going into it with this is just going to be another Borat movie, or Bruno or The Dictator, because my opinion of stuff was really starting to diminish as different projects were coming down.
Sort of like what I talked about in my video, that
exactly like what you talked about in your video. And just like you had said, like Who's America, things started to change. A number of the crew had worked with him on Who's America.
Yeah.
So these were all people he had an established relationship with.
Yeah.
And we got to, we did a film screening over Amazon Screening because pandemic was still going on. We were all over the country. There wasn't going to be an in-person showing.
Yeah.
And I watch it while staying with friends in Seattle. And it just blew my mind, honestly.
That's awesome.
It was nothing of what I was expecting. And I was watching it with my roommates at the time, and I was then pointing out and I was there, and I was there, and I was there. The bathroom scene, the reason why there's a guy with his face blurred out was he was not vetted. He was just a guy going to the bathroom that I couldn't stop. I was the PA on the bathroom door trying to keep people out so they could film. And he just blew right past me. And that was the take that they went with because it was the best one.
And it's funny. It's a good comedy beat to have just a random, because the face is blurred, it's an actual civilian walking in.
Yeah, well, and then the field producers accosted him afterwards, offering him money and trying to get him to sign a photo release. He called the cops on us.
That's crazy. Wow.
We had to bail because we found out the cops were called, and all of us got off. The last vehicle was getting out of that gas station as the first cop was pulling in.
Wow. This is so exciting. We could probably talk to you for another hour if we had the time, but thank you so much for chatting with us, Lou.
You're very welcome.
Is there anything else that you've got going on at the moment that you want to talk about or you want to plug? Up to you. I assume a lot of the stuff you're working on, you can't really tell us what it is, but
well, project-wise, there's not a lot of that I can. No, I'm stuck under NDAs on what I'm working on at the moment. But I do have an Instagram that documents my travels and adventures.
I'm definitely going to follow you there.
And it's It's Greenie and Crew. So Green, I-E, and Crew, all spelled out.
Awesome.
It's currently starring. I have a plushie Eevee that I got when I was working the 2019 Pokemon World Championship. I was the production assistant for the Twitch broadcast.
Nice.
Nice.
And I bought one of the custom Pokemon that the Pokemon Company made for the event specifically.
Yeah.
And he serves as my photograph focus as I document my travels, the projects that I work on, and the food that I eat, because I'm a bit of a foodie.
Yeah. Nice. Well, we'll put a link to that in the show notes of this episode. And yeah, thank you for coming on. We've got one final question.
Just to finish off, I have to ask.
Absolutely.
Can you do a Borat impression?
I do. Very nice.
Yay! Very cool.
Were people doing that on set? Like, were people...
No, actually, there was... we weren't allowed to do anything like that.
I love that.
At all.
That's so funny.
Because specifically, one, it could have been considered mocking.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And would have been disrespectful to Sasha.
Mm-hmm.
And two, we were under a $5 million NDA.
That's so scary. Wow. Awesome. Well, hey, thank you, Lou. We'll let you go now. But yeah, thank you for talking to us, and best of luck with all your future endeavors. It sounds like you've got some exciting stuff coming up, and we'll put a link to your Instagram in our show notes, and we'll follow you there as well. Thank
you so much. I just had a movie I worked on premiere at Tribeca this year.
Oh, cool.
Clean by Adrian Brody.
Oh, nice. Awesome. I'll check that out as well. All right, Richard, that was our interview with Lou Gluchov. What'd you think?
Better than I remembered.
Yeah, that's good. At the time, you're stoned out of your mind, not... Yeah, so thank you very much for listening, everybody. If this is your first ever podcast by Popture, then please consider following us. We do all sorts of things. We watch film franchises and analyze them. So if you're new and film is an interest of yours, you may like our show. So stay tuned. And if you're already a fan, I don't need to say anything to you except thank you. But please,
and you're looking nice today.
Yes. Please consider supporting us. You can like us on all the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. There will also be a link to Lou's Instagram in the show notes. You can also support us on Patreon if you so choose, patreon.com/cultpopture, and join our Discord server where you can talk with our little community about whatever you want to talk to them about. And yeah, after this music stops playing, we're going to do a little thing called the post-credits scene. But other than that, thank you, Richard.
Thank you, AJ.
And thank you, Lou Gluchov, and thank you, Borat. Welcome, everybody, to the post-credits scene. This is a little segment at the end of each episode where if you donate $5 or more over at patreon.com/cultpopture, you get to give us something to talk about in the post-credits scene. It can be a question, it can be a little game, or it can be like something that will actually take effort that we'll need to plan ahead for.
And we'll put off for months.
Put off for months, exactly. So, Richard, post-credit scene. Who is this post-credit scene from, and what does it say?
This comes to us from Vincent Lara, who says,
"Hey,
what a piece of media that is perfect in your mind, but you don't want to revisit because you know it won't hold up." My answer for this is probably Lost.
Yeah, what a fucking good answer. Yeah, man.
Yeah, Lost is like, I look back so fondly. It's like my experience watching that is for the first time, like as it was airing, like watching every episode the day it came out, like as it aired on free-to-air television. That's like that'll never be replicated for me, I don't think. Yeah, like I don't think in the entire 6 seasons, I don't think I ever like taped a show and watched it the next day, you know? Whereas like in the world of streaming now and whatnot, it's not as urgent to watch things. And, you know, some of my favorite shows, I'll be like, whatever, you know, I'll check it out tomorrow. I'll wait till the season's out and then binge the whole thing. But yeah, Lost was this like very special religious experience for me every week, and I've revisited parts of it. I tried to get my ex-girlfriend to watch it, and got like 2 or 3 episodes in, and then it kind of just fell by the wayside.
Broke up.
It's because she didn't like it, and so I don't know that I would make it through. That I would want to watch the whole thing again, just because it's such a perfect memory.
Yeah, I'm in a similar space with Lost. I've got the like bumper DVD box sets that are just collecting dust on my shelf and have been there for years. On a similar token, I feel like as each year passes, it's going to be less and less easy to return to Scrubs. Which is a show which was like really, really important to me as I sprouted into adulthood. But not only is it now like contains a lot of sort of stuff that the show creators and stars have acknowledged.
There's a couple of bits of blackface.
Yeah, that sort of thing. But it's also like a format of sitcom that no longer really exists, and I think can feel a little quaint watching with its like jazzy musical cues at the start of each episode, and like because TV, I feel like TV moves on faster than film does.
Yeah,
so it's a very old. I mean, you could say the same thing for Lost, probably, in terms of the way it does drama. Revolutionary at the time, that is now.
Yeah, but it was
not
limited.
Commonplace in the sense that we've passed by it now.
And Lost was suffered from the fact that like it was before shows could just be like 10 episodes, especially like dramas, that they have to be 24 episode seasons, and boy did they not need to be.
Yeah, boy, oh boy. Yeah, nice. There you go.
But I also just want to say Scrubs. I still love Scrubs.
Well, I still love it.
And I revisit
I still love Lost.
I revisit it all the time.
Well, I envy you.